Today, I'd like to welcome you to the latest edition of the AI Credit webinar specials, the CXO series. Today, we have for you Mr. Bhupesh Daheria, the CEO at the Aegis School of Data Science and Cybersecurity. And today, he's going to be talking about the emergence of new age academic institutions, a global perspective. Moderating the session, we have Samir Dhanajani, the CEO and co-founder of AI Curate Advisory and Consulting. Before we start the session, a few housekeeping rules. If you could all please be on mute throughout the entire session, it'll help in the speaking and listening quality of everybody. We'll be taking questions, but towards the end of the session, I would request you to use the chat and Q&A panel that you have on WebEx. Relay the questions to me, and I will send them to Samir, who will take them up with Bhupesh. All right, before we start, I'd like to introduce Bhupesh. Bhupesh Daheria is the CEO of the Aegis School of Data Science and Cybersecurity and the managing trustee of the Aegis Knowledge Trust. He's a serial entrepreneur, educator, and a prolific speaker with over 25 years experience in telecom, innovation, skilling, data science, AI, higher education, and edutech. In early 2006, he founded MUni Campus for improving education quality and efficiency. And in 2010, he initiated the Aegis Graham Bell Awards to recognize innovators in the fields of time and SMAC. He is a prolific speaker and has addressed over 90,000 professionals, students, and academicians on AI, data science, and big data. Bhupesh also writes on topics like education, edtech, and careers at Economic Times, Education Times, and The Hindu, to name a few. Bhupesh, it's an honor to have you. Thank you so much for being here. I would again request people to please be on mute during the entire session. Samir, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Rohan. Bhupesh, thank you so much for sparing time and being part of the AI Curate webinar session, the CXO series. Must admit, I have known you from last almost 4-5 years, and one of the first things which really intrigued me when I read at your profile at the beginning was CEO, Aegis School of Data Science and Cybersecurity. And when I had the privilege of interacting you in multiple forums, conferences, and had discussions with you, I realized I think you run the academic institution just like a corporate CEO will run. Quick, very fast on your decision making, just being very, very clear in terms of how you evangelize education. So I think it's a kind of a privilege for us to have you on our CXO series. So thank you so much for sparing time. I think.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I think just to kind of start the discussion, Bhupesh, I had this question which I've really parked for you. A lot has changed in the industry over the last 4-5 years. In fact, when Rohan was making introduction, he used this word SMAC, and you rightly kind of, let's say, picked it up at the time when it was very, very relevant. The social mobility, analytics, and cloud kind of set of acronyms came in. But if we really look at today, the whole suite of academic institutions, the relevance to industry still seems to be missing. While there are jobs which have emerged on data science, cybersecurity, IoT, different kind of new age exponential technologies, but largely, and I'm being generic out here, most of the academic institutions haven't been able to kind of catch up to that pace. They're not in sync with this reality. What's your opinion in terms of what's happening in this world of academic institutions and industry, and this aspect of relevancy of course programs? Is it real? I mean, you see the gap still happening, or you believe it's catching up? Would like to pick up your perspective, please.
So first of all, thank you so much, Funny and NK and AI Accurate for starting this kind of series. And I know you for a long. And last week when you approached me, I was really excited to really speak on this topic about building up the new academic infusion, because that's what I have been doing for last 20 years, day and night. I said, okay, I have a lot to really share from where to really start. So I think you really touch very relevant point, and every academic conference I keep on hearing about academicians discussing these issues, that how do we really become relevant. Industry has always been very critical about academic institutions and the way they are operating, the kind of program they offer. And you're right, in last at least 10 years, most of these academic programs have started losing relevance, uh, because the pace, the way industry is changing is exponential, and it is becoming extremely difficult. It is not only difficult for academic institutions, but it's also becoming difficult, extremely difficult for industry to really cope up with that. Now, so I'll try to really ponder upon like which are the fundamental issues with academic institutions, and try to give you the analogy with the corporate world. Now, most of our iPhone. Why? Because iPhone was designed properly. The specification is perfect. It is being manufactured perfect. And now that's a product for Apple. Now, if we see for academic world, what is the product? For academic world, the product is the program. And the specification of the program is primarily a course curriculum, what you going to really teach. Now, uh, what I have been doing a lot of work in last say 18 years, but last 2 3 years we have extensively worked on this area. That the way the curriculum is being designed, not only in India, across the world. How they design the curriculum. So there is a team of academician, which is from internal business school or university or that particular department, maybe 4 or 5 academicians. And there is an industry academic industry expert body, which could be like a maybe 4 5 or a 10.
Right.
And a group of say 10 to 12 people try to decide about the future of millions of people. Now, this is a huge responsibility. Now, this used to work pretty well, say 30 years back, because that time the pace of change was very slow. Now, the pace of change has drastically improved. Now, what I have seen in my experience, limited experience, that sometime when you have higher the experience, you bring a lot of biases on a table. Imagine that you are trying to really design a curriculum for analytics or data science, and you have some PhD in mathematics. They will try to really uh, see the world from their PhD degree, and they'll try to push that everything in data science is all about mathematics and statistics. If you bring somebody who has worked in top IT, they will try to really see that yes, the coding is most important. Perhaps the Python and Java is everything, mathematics. Now, if somebody you bring on a board who represents some vendor, it could be Google, it could be AWS, it could be IBM or anybody else. They will also bring their own biases in terms of their own products and solutions which they're selling. Now, and if you roll out that kind of curriculum, that actually do not uh, give the right representation, right? Now, so, and you poorly design the curriculum. So that's one of the fundamental problem. I'll tell you how we have resolved that problem at Aegis. So first thing is the curriculums are poorly designed. They do not cater to the need of typical industry, because those who are designing, they also have got limited idea, and the idea is based on their limited experience or over experience, and they are not able to really visualize what the world or universe is requiring. That's one problem. Now the other fundamental problem is that this world, which is typically Asia, Africa, and 60% of Europe, uh, this part of the world, people have not invested in digital infrastructure. They have built a brick mortar infrastructure. And so one of the fundamental layer for any academic institution is knowledge dissemination. Like, to give you a very simplistic example, which all of us we can really relate. If you're teaching, say, probability in a class, after teaching a probability, what perhaps you would like to do to students? Give them the content, right? And after the content, you would like to really give them the assessment examination. Now, this whole kind of knowledge dissemination, the content sharing, because the content is not only lying in the textbook, which we used to really get while we were studying in schools. Now there's a tons of content which is in digital format. You have videos, you have PPTs, you have articles, you have news, you have blogs, you have a discussion like even this kind of webinar. Now there's a content, and that tons of a content in the normal method you cannot really disseminate. You cannot disseminate over email, or you cannot just throw it over the WhatsApp. And to manage that kind of content, you require learning management system. Ironically, in India, you have hardly 3% learning management system deployment. Here in UK, it is 97%, and in North America, it is a 95%, and that's a backbone. And you will be surprised to hear that India is the only country worldwide which has launched EduSet. But this EduSet project is not working for last 6-7 years. Why? Because we do not have the content sharing layer, which is called learning management system. And 10 years back, I remember, like not 10, 15 years back, the government of India invested 5 crore rupees on each university, and they set up a digital studio in almost 110 universities. So there is a chance of content transfer, which is a lecture, but there's no repository where you can really keep a content, and that simple layer is called LMS. So there is a lot of components of digital infrastructure which I can really talk about, which includes a learning management system, which includes like this kind of web conferencing system, which becomes pretty prominent in COVID-19 kind of situation when people are locked down. So people are using on Zoom or WebEx or whatnot, right? Every media, but that's a very small layer. So you have learning management system, you have web conferencing, you have online application system, you have assessment and examination, and tons of whole stuff. So one, again, there is an issue with the curriculum design because product is badly, and that's the reason there is no taker. And that's the reason when the student moves out, they don't find a job because they didn't got the right kind of skills, what they're supposed to get. Second, the digital infrastructure is completely missing. And when there is no digital infrastructure, the learning outcome deteriorates drastically. So, education model is more on the delivery. It is not focused. It has not still shifted on the outcome, right? But it means that I deliver you. I don't care what you understand, right? So outcome is out of the system. That's the second problem. The third fundamental problem is, which is again related to digital, but there is a huge inefficiency in the system. And the resources are scarce resources. So the number of enrollments has increased drastically, but quality of faculty has not increased, right? I will not get into that debate whether academicians get are fairly paid well, and there's no, we should not, a teacher should not compare the salary of their student. The corporate salaries are always higher in any part of the world, be it US or be it Europe or India. Always there is a disparity between academic salaries and the industry salary. But in India, you don't have a teacher, and there's a cultural issue because this teaching profession is not important, right? People don't really see that the teaching profession should be the topmost priority, just like an engineering profession. Or
if I may chime in, Mukesh, you've touched a great spectrum of themes, which I think you started with this whole knowledge dissemination. And I want to peel one by one and really get into some of these specifics because for the participants, I think it's very interesting to know what's the scenario. So knowledge dissemination you talked about. You talked about the learning management system, where we have a big void in India, given the kind of, let's say, systems not being there in terms of creating that digital infrastructure, even though the government gave a grant. And third thing, you very nicely articulated this aspect about we focused more on delivery than the output. It's like instructor-led kind of a, let's say, delivery, and the moment it happens, then we are back, the student is back to his own or her own kind of a base. Now, if we look and continuing that the same discussion, if we look at a spectrum in the landscape of academic institutions today, specifically higher education, we have those in our own world, the Ivy League, the premier business institutions, the engineering. Then there is a whole set of new edtech, MOOCs, which have come in. And the middle layer, I'm not kind of putting a sequence, but the middle layer is this new age academic institutions which are supple, very agile, very kind of, let's say, quick in terms of content, the programs, and they're very closely knit with the industry. Do you see this spectrum coming to a change in the time to come, given we have huge issues in terms of deployment of students? Largely, I'm talking about that industry usually do not kind of, let's say, reckon many of these programs, and they say, look, we don't want to kind of, while we take, even if we take these students, we will rather train them for another 3-6 months. What's your view on this?
So, see, anyway, academic industry was undergoing, sorry to this word, but education industry is one of the largest industries. Today, you will be surprised to hear most of us, we know education industry revenue stands today is $6 trillion, which is 4 times the telecom industry. Yes, telecom industry is $1.5 trillion only. And only in India, if we talk about telecom industry is 60 billion and education industry is 100 billion. Software industry is 3.5 trillion and education industry is 6 trillion. Retail industry is 8.5 trillion. So it is one of the largest industry. And next 10 years, it is going to be $10 trillion. So this is run by one of the smartest people across the world. Unlike, people have a wrong notion about that. Now, you're right that the employability of the output is deteriorating. And again, multiple factors because they are not rightly trained. The industry requirement is largely changing. The way companies used to recruit 10 years back, they're not recruiting because number is declining. And the skills are becoming niche skills, right? And these skills could be in blockchain, AI, machine learning, deep learning, big data, right? All those stuff. But still, that number is not pretty large in India and worldwide. Still, if we see in a software, like if we talk about India, so we did a research that how many jobs are there in AI and big data and all these areas. There are hardly 28,000 jobs are there against all the reports which you find on the newspaper and the other areas, right? Which is still a pretty small number as compared to the number of graduates we generate. So India produces roughly around 1.4 million graduates, which is close to half a population of Dubai, right? So every year, that's the kind of number we produce. Higher education, we graduate, India is having roughly around enrollment of close to 37 million students, which is bigger than Canada's population. So our scale is pretty large, and can industry can absorb that entire number? The answer is straight no. So the corporate world cannot really absorb this kind of number. They can't really take.
But you mentioned about analytics, AI job opportunities. I mean, outside of technology, which just in India, 190 billion. Textile is a big industry. It's the second largest employer, and there are multiple other industry. So, what is the problem in terms of deployment, if I may ask?
No, come again, Samir.
So
I could not hear you.
To say, if you rightly said about this whole challenge of, while there are about 28-30,000 jobs in analytics, there are other industries as well. While there are 37 million students, what is lacking? I mean, in terms of deployability, because even if this 1.4 million graduates you talked about, the overall deployability rate, Bhupesh, is just about 18-20%. So 80% of that talent.
Lesser than that. Samir, I used to lesser than that.
No reason to worry. So where is this challenge, if I may ask your opinion, please, on this?
The problem with that the government actually do not plan that which area will require what kind of manpower. So the kind of graduates they are coming out of, everybody want to get into computer science. Now, can an IT company can recruit everybody? The answer is no. There's a huge employment in agriculture. There's a huge employment in manufacturing. There's a huge employment in textile. There's a huge employment in every other industry. But there's a huge problem with the media, that media would like to really focus on certain area. There's a huge problem with the policymakers as well. So they do not really take the decision based on the data, right? So whatever the media talks about, wherever the wave goes, everybody start training the people in that area. So I am seeing a disturbing trend that since last 3-4 years, everybody is beating drum around the AI and big data and analytics. And now millions of graduates are coming, and what MBA took say 20 years to burst that bubble, the AI and data science bubble is bursting, and thousands and millions of people, those who are poorly trained, they are not getting the job. Because when you really push and create a hype around something, and when there is not faculty trained and there is no processes and right kind of, when I'm saying infrastructure, I'm talking about the process, faculty, and the content and the industry readiness, everything, which is not there. So these are the problems. And of course, if you really focus, if you really know, it is just like when you really manufacturing something in a plant, worked on the shop floor, you can't really random produce millions of items. You have to really plan what is the demand and supply. And based on that, you will produce stuff. And why we need to really take a corporate approach in education, because at the end of the day, these students, they are taking the loans from the bank. Their cost is being subsidized by parents saving, which they have saved it for their older days. So education is not coming free of cost, and the cost of education drastically improved exponentially, and not only in India, worldwide. So 20 years back, what MBA used to cost $5,000, today that MBA is costing $100,000. 20 years back, what MBA program fees in India was 30,000 rupees. Today, that is costing 15 lakh rupees, because the cost of delivery, the cost of acquisition, the marketing, infrastructure, everything is exponentially. So when the
Right.
cost structure has changed, we need to be cautious where we would like to really put resources. And activity need to be backed up by AI, and all like you can play a huge role, giving the government idea that, gentlemen, here is the demand and here is the gap. Don't oversupply, don't overproduce. And also did some work. We built a tool called AI tool for finding the skill and job analysis and current requirement. And we try to really solve this problem, and we gave this tool to government of Goa, and we are, my own Infusion Aegis is currently using to design the curriculum and identifying the right kind of needs, which is very well needed, that people need to really take a decision based on the data and not
So also, if I take a view,
everything.
you raised a very good point about this whole dysfunctionality, if I put it that way, in the system, and it will take some time. But as you also said, there is a huge market. $6 trillion of education market globally is a big market. Now, the fact over there, if the institutions which are investing rightly in the curriculum, the programs, the right kind of content, certainly there are spate of online MOOCs coming in or platforms coming in, and they offer, because they're backed up largely, many of them are backed up by heavy funding from venture capitalists, private equity funds. Suddenly, you find the same curriculum getting available for a pittance. How do you see this in the whole ecosystem? Is that a trend? It's a fad, or this will be the new normal?
So I will give two perspectives.
Sure.
Perspective from university, those who are running, and perspective from the student and perhaps industry. For a student, this is a boon, right? Because now there is democratization of the content is happening. So I always used to talk that the India or the whole world has suffered largely because of the birth penalty. Birth penalty is essentially if you're born in Bastar, you will not have access to the content and you will remain poor. Now, today, nobody can really say that, whether you're in Bastar or whether you're in Chhattisgarh or whether you're in New York or Bombay, or everybody has access to the same kind of content. And courtesy that there is enough bandwidth, everybody is having the mobile phone, so nobody can crib about that. It has solved that problem. And that content is available virtually free of cost. And Coursera and edX, they have done extremely good job, and they have been funded millions of dollars. And there are a lot of edtech companies which have started offering, say, courses on a low cost, like a Udemy. In India, you have Simply Learn and Jigsaw, and tons of these have come. And of course, they have really giving good quality of content, which is not only students, but also faculties are also getting trained, right? Which is about the academic world. Now, those who are running universities. Now, if you talk about the revenue part of online courses, that constitutes to hardly 0.3 to 0.5% of this $6 trillion revenue. So for academic industry, actually that revenue doesn't matter, right? And that's the reason most of the Ivy League schools and top institutions, they are offering this content free of cost. India has launched our own SWAM. There is the NPTEL. Even Pakistan has got this kind of move. So there is a democratization is happening, but there is still a major portion which is untouched, because which is on campus education, right? Because people would like to send their kids to universities and schools and colleges. This MOOC and digital content will become a supplement content. This cannot be a primary source of a knowledge, because knowledge is not only digesting the content. Knowledge is about how do you really behave in a society and how do you really behave in a group. And for that, you require a different kind of environment, which university and college can only provide, right? Sami, I'm sure that you would not like to really keep your kid at home and start teaching through the MOOC. They're doing wonderful job, but can they resolve all the problems of the world of education? I have my own suspicion on that.
Tell me one thing, Bhupesh. In this age of gig economy, sorry, we have an echo. So in this age of gig economy, one second, I think there is some echo. Are you noticing an echo, or is it fine?
I can hear an echo, Sumit.
Great. So you touched a very relevant point, and I want to come back to that. But there is a very interesting question which has come in, because there are steady flow of questions, and I don't want to miss actually taking views from you. And this is very, very topical today. And this is more generic, that with COVID, the pandemic impacting everyone in terms of industry, academic institutions largely have seen a drop in terms of intake and also the student enrollment. And that's what is the current scenario if you're observing. But more importantly, how are academic institutions dealing with this situation? What's your view on this, Bhupesh?
So the whole academic world is under shock, right? So I spoke to, in last 20 days, I've spoken to almost 60, 70 owners, vice chancellors, private universities, everybody. And the problem is that most of the academic institutions even don't have a cash flow to pay salary in the month of June. Somehow they can really manage May, but June, July, they don't have money to really pay. Schools don't have the fund. The government is saying that yes, they have to release the salary, but at the same time, government has also issued the notification to all the academic institutions not to collect the tuition fee. Now, primary source of running academic institution is basically tuition fee, because now there are more number of academic institutions run by the private institutions than the government. Now, India has got almost 950 universities, out of which almost 700, 600 universities are private universities. You can really see the amount. Right? Now, Europe, typically, the government has announced that all the academic sessions will be suspended till October. US is contemplating the entire scrapping the next 1 year. So there has been a talk among the universities of mergers, And if they don't do that, they will really go bankrupt. Now, that's the situation. Coming back, how they are getting ready to really cope up with this. Last 15-20 days or a month, everybody is trying to really gear up going online. And that's where there's a huge jump on online training. Universities are gearing up to deliver online content, online classes. What they are doing, what they have done in last month, they have not done in last 20 years, surprisingly, right? At least in developing world. US, UK, they already had built the digital infrastructure, so they don't have much the problem. But also their larger revenue comes from the international students. So their problem is different. So if we come back to the India, yes, everybody started really going and hiring the infrastructure because they don't have really time to build. And to give you the example, while we are talking, there's an online examination being conducted by my team for NITI, National Institute of Industrial Engineering. Right, so their online examination, which is descriptive examination, is being conducted. While we are talking, the online classes in my own institution is happening. So we locked down our institution on 13th of March, right, just after Holi, and are going on. So those who had the infrastructure, they are doing the business normally, but roughly 98 to 99% institutions were not ready. And what do? So they have shut down, and now they are gearing up because 3 days back, UGC Secretary Mr. Jain has released a notification in India that, and there is a committee headed by Professor Ford and Professor Rao, that the academic session in India need to start from September, not in July. Right? It means that Indian academic institutions are getting ready for next 6 to 8 month conduction of the classes online. This is the readiness. This is the government mandate. Now, so mentally they are getting ready. Now they have to really get into this mode of bringing the digital infrastructure. So they are going to Zoom for conduction of classes, free classes for 30 minutes, 35 minutes, but these are the temporary arrangements. They need a robust brick mortar infrastructure to really support. And we don't know when this virus will again come back, second wave or third wave. All these academic institutions need to really get ready. And until they don't get ready, they will not be able to really build the confidence in parents, in students, and they will not be able to really take care of the cash flow problem. But yes, there will be severe issue of the cash flow with these academic institutions, and hope government can really find some issue, but institution cannot really bank on the government to really bail them out. They have to think innovatively, and that's where this MOOC platform, this digital infrastructure will be the only way which is going to really help them.
Great. So no, I think it's a good set of insights what you gave, and good to know how the connect you have in the ecosystem is providing a good kind of insights for our participants. I'll switch back to one more challenge, and don't call me out if I'm specifying too many challenges. I think that's where it's good for your opinion. I think once we are out of this, recovery happens, there is another big elephant, which is what we call the future of work. I know what Aegis does in terms of the programs, but largely, if you talk about today, entrepreneurship, startups, gig workers, now that's a very, very different breed of employers, rather kind of professionals who are coming into the market. And on the other side, you talked about democratization of content, online courses taking a whole kind of a, let's say, glory in terms of kind of being in the forefront. Now, are we saying that as the system evolves, should we focus, and you rightly mentioned about the paucity of jobs, not because of the deployment, but by the sheer numbers, so that we have to look at other sectors. But if you really look at these big sectors which are emerging, gig workers, we talk about, let's say, startups, entrepreneurs, what should this? Are we really managing this whole ecosystem of creation of gig workers entrepreneurs nicely, or you believe there is a lot to be done from academic side?
Uh, I have multiple views, which maybe
And I also want, Bhupesh, also you to kind of talk about this often. There is a question also on this seemingly always evolving theory about industry academy relationship. And I know how to build those very right bridges with that, but would like to hear your view on that part of the response also, please.
okay, fantastic. So, see, academic institutions now in the Western world, anyway, all the universities. So, to give you a small story, 4 years back, me and Dr. Gangopadhyay, we visited, we were invited by Ontario government. So, we visited Ryerson University, Marx, Communitech, and what we saw, which is pretty surprising, and now it is also started happening in India. So while in third year, students start preparing for GRE, CAT, or GMAT examinations, or maybe campus, their kids are preparing for startup venture. And in final year, when our students are appearing for TCS or Wipro, Cognizant interview, there these students are meeting the venture capitalists. And by the time our student goes and join for TCS, they get their card printed as a founding CEO and founding CTO and employ a couple more students from their university and get the funding of minimum 250K to 500,000. So these are the two contrary worlds, right? Toronto, which is smaller than New Bombay, hosts almost 8,000 startups, right? And this
8,000
has great,
startups. Okay.
yeah, okay. And so the Waterloo, which is smaller than Bela, has got highest number of concentration of talent and startup. Now, this Bangalore is becoming the startup hub of this Asia. Now that trend has started happening, and a lot of Indian universities have started hosting the incubation center. And the government has also a scheme where government has also initiated Atal Incubation Center. The government, in a socialistic way, not in a capitalistic way, is trying to really run incubation centers in part of university and academic institution, which is not perfected, but at least that good start is happening, right? And hopefully, in next 4 to 5 years, this ecosystem will start maturing, and that's where uh, this industry academia partnership is greatly needed, not only for the logo sharing purpose, wherein industry and institution comes, join the hands, and they share the logo, but the real industry academia partnership will happen when the industry guys they come on a campus, they start taking courses, they start mentoring students on startup, they start giving them the real life project, they give them a problem which they will solve, and that's how the student interest will get invoked, and perhaps that will change the whole ecosystem for startup companies, because today what happens, the when a student moves out of the engineering college or a graduation he does, and then he starts a startup, first 2 3 startup he fails, right? And then if he is lucky, he will be successful in third or fourth startup. Very few are able to really launch a successful startup in their first attempt, because that kind of grooming is not done, and we cannot blame academic institution for that, because their job, if they can really teach the theory properly, they have done their job well, and we should really give them credit for that. Now, how do we really monetize that theory knowledge, and how do we really convert that research into monetizable startup or IP? That is where the industry guys need to really come. And
But
I'm
to
seeing a
your
good trend.
point, if I may chime in, please, you're saying there are Atal incubation centers. Now, if government, which has launched a very good initiative, works with industry to say these incubation centers are also learning centers to breed new entrepreneurs, do you think academic institutions will buy it in that form if it's done in that
Today,
manner?
academic institutions, today academic institutions are desperate. So, what like the arrogance of academic institutions 20 years back, I have seen that has mellowed down. So today, academic institutions are going forward. They are actually reaching to the corporate world that come help us. But what I'm seeing, these are two different worlds. industry guys in a different forum sitting there and cribbing and criticizing academic institution that they are not doing a job well. But the industry also need to really see that it is just like you're sitting in a drawing room and you're complaining and criticizing your wife that she's not really producing a good food. But you need to really go and help her and see what food she's cooking. And if you don't like, you also, so basically you have to co-create it because you will be the consumer.
Right.
And that has been done why American universities are worldwide respected. The reason being the industry comes together with academic institution, they do the funding, they hold the hand, and eventually whatever the product which comes, which is essentially a student and research, they are able to really absorb it back. And that is needed. So you're rightly said that in this kind of incubation center where the government is funding massively, Niti money, the corporate world need to really come. Like say this whole AI revolution. Let's take an example. This whole AI revolution was not started in corporate campuses. It was started in university campuses, right? So Jeffrey Hinton and his students, those who are doing PhD, they did a major research in University of Toronto. Most of the research has come out of the universities. Most of the chief data scientists, they are professors. And they have been doing research for last 20 years and 30 years, which industry is consuming it. So industry need to really see, and even in India and other developing world, that they need to really collaborate today with the academic world. And the IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay, IIT Kharagpur, combine these three institutions, the kind of startup they have produced, it is 20 times more startup than which is produced by MIT, Wharton, and Kellogg combined, which is amazing.
Say that again. This is something revealing, Bhupesh. I think, can you please say that again, what you said? I think this is something good for the parts.
Bombay, IIT Delhi, and IIT Kharagpur combine the kind of startup they have produced. It is startups than MIT, Stanford, Wharton, Carnegie Mellon together.
Wonderful, wonderful. So it's essentially it's our, I would say, lack of awareness which is kind of making us think in that direction. Actually, good, good. I want to switch to a different track, Bhupesh, and I'm also cognizant of the questions which are streaming in like at a very fast velocity. This aspect about learning, you touched that in the beginning. As more and more learning in terms of how it's imparted as a pedagogy or a content or delivery channel gets more intuitive, more immersive, more interactive, uh, the role of the faculty, the role of a professor gets into a very different aspect altogether. Now, there are theories about the robots will come in, and I'm just talking about in a generic sense. There'll be more kind of knowledge which the professor needs to build in to be more in tune with the industry. There are more industry folks which will come in and become quasi professors. What is that you think in terms of a future forward? And I'm also not taking out the online learning part. So the credits, the course curriculum will be very, very different as what we see today. And if I may ask, and I'm just now aggregating and talking to the CEO of Aegis Data Science and Cybersecurity School, what's the new secret sauce of building an academic institution 5 years from now?
So you have a couple of questions. So let me take the last question first, perhaps, right?
It's all subsumed under that, Bhupesh. Idea also kind of really have you, I mean, do a playbook for us actually on this.
So let's understand, as technology is becoming coming prominent, playing a major role in the class, the teacher's role is becoming more and more important. Because today the students are struggling with the content overflow syndrome. Now, how do we really I find which content is the right for me? So the teacher's role traditionally, what used to happen 20 years back, today teacher's role is more of a mentor role, is a more of a consultant role, right? Education institution need to really get into the more on a consultative way. instead of teaching a Java, which they can really go and study in Coursera or edX or YouTube, now teacher need to really come into consultative mode. How to really use Java to improve the life of a human being or solve a problem, right? Like, say, example, to give you example, when this COVID thing started happening, we had a meeting of all the faculty members, the entire Aegis fraternity, and I made appeal to all the faculty members that, look, this is the testing time. Now, can you really do something to fight COVID-19? And that is the testing of your knowledge. If you cannot really do something about that, everything what you're teaching and everything for what we stand, it all goes for, right? And believe me, and within a weeks, all the faculty members, they produce a product which is called Corona Khojo for home quarantine, right? And which use the facial recognition, which use the location tracking and all those stuff. Why I gave you the example that institution need to really get the mode of delivery to application of the knowledge, and that is where the human role will become much more prominent, and that's where robots and AI cannot help. AI and robots can only help in terms of really dissemination of the content, but application of the content, human will come, because human has a huge ability in terms of really solving the complex problems and finding the solution. That's one part. Second, how the institutions will be built in after 5 years, and even today, but the government and also need to really reduce the weightage on the brick mortar infrastructure, because enough brick mortar infrastructure is built. I have seen institutions, those who have invested money on 20 acres and 100 acres, borrowed a massive sum of the money, and they don't have the money to even pay to the faculty members, right? So they're crippling with the weight of paying, say, repayment to the banks. Now, brick mortar infrastructure is not critical component for running academic institution. One of the most critical component for any academic institution is basically people, teachers, those who have a knowledge, those who can help a student to convert that knowledge into a product. And they need to really build, invest heavily on digital infrastructure. And this COVID-19 situation in last 2 months has proven this thing, that all the brick mortar infrastructure is being locked, is shut down. All the classes are happening digitally from home.
If I just kind of summarize what you said, and I want you to continue, but it's about, you're saying the days of large campuses seemingly at some point of time will get over, but as a hedge, that needs to come in the form of world-class true faculty, which is really kind of giving that impeccable set of contextual as well as conceptual learning to the students. Is that right?
Right. Yes.
Right.
Backed up with the digital infrastructure. Today, like while we are having this conversation, there is no boundaries, there's no digital, there's no physical infrastructure is required. I can really go out in the street and then really can talk to you. What is needed is a strong digital infrastructure. And that is what is needed for the new age of academic institution.
What
And
else,
that's where
besides this, what else do you believe the academic institutions of the future will have?
Future of academic institution will apply, use a lot of AI tools in terms of really designing their course curriculum. They will be massively investing on digital infrastructure, right on not only teaching, but in replicating the entire academic administration process, which is there on the ground campus, onto the cloud. Because while you will be delivering the world-class education on the cloud, you need to replicate those processes, which is like taking attendance, taking grades, right, doing the assignments, making students to really do the projects, reviewing those projects, interfacing with the industries, right? So this whole new business model is going to evolve. There are new processes which is going to evolve. So build upon the previous on-campus brick mortar processes, right? I'm not saying that brick mortar infrastructure will be irrelevant. it will be very well relevant typically in K-12 segment and undergrad education, because that's where you require a playground. That's where your kids' learning happens, overall learning happens. But I'm not very sure about the higher education and continuing education, because even you are learning and I am learning. But do we have to really have a large brick campus infrastructure to go and study? The answer is no, right? If they are fantastic. If it is not there, we are much more comfortable on the digital infrastructure. Third, the world will also shift towards this live interactive knowledge sharing rather than the canned recorded sharing. So the canned recorded content revolution MOOC platform brought, which is Coursera edX. So one side I said that they have democratized the content dissemination, but there is also darker aspect that dropout rate in Coursera and edX is close to 98%. Means
98%.
yeah, so if 100 student has enrolled for a course, 98%, 98 student will drop out of that course. Now, how do we really engage? Like, for example, if we really record this whole session and put it on the YouTube, it will not be engaging. Because if you have a question, you would like to ask me. If I have a question, I would like to really ask you. And that is what is needed in a consultative education. It's not only a one
One
way.
question which has come in on the same aspect what you're saying, Bhupesh, and this is really interesting thought what you have. Are we saying, and this is a question which has come in, even while we talked about the days of the large campuses as some seemingly will not be there in the time to come, but this of knowledge, which means eventually as a student, I need to get a desired set of credits. And I have a kind of a curriculum which is in front of me. Now, and I'm posing that question, as long as I'm able to pick up the content from, let's say, the specific institute where I'm enrolled, or any other, like, let's say, open learning platform, and I'm able to also pick up my own subjects. Is that the kind of future we are talking about in terms of learning?
Yes, we are seeing this future across the world, and in fact, India has also adopted that. So
Sure.
now AICT, Dr. Sahasrabudhe, Anil Sahasrabudhe, who is the current chairman of AICT, very progressive man, and AICT has introduced that at least 10% of the credit you can take it from the MOOC platform, which is FAM. So not necessarily that you have to study in the class. You can really take credit of 10% credit is like a huge jump for India, jumping to really moon, right? Knowing this academic world, how rigid the system is. So I think world is adopting, and this COVID-19 situation, which will persist for next 6 months, this will change the whole academic perspective, the way people really think and the way they really run. And I'd also like to give you a perspective, like say for today is one of the top institutes in India, and we were the first one to start data science in Asia. We don't own a single penny infrastructure. We have campus in Bombay, Pune, and Bangalore, right? In one of the best locations. But we have not invested on the infrastructure brick model. We invested heavily on digital infrastructure. So I also run a company called, and that's where we have built the digital infrastructure, which hundreds of other institutions are actually using. So what we have done, we created a lean business model wherein we are able to really pay more. We are able to incentivize faculty because they are able to really bring the knowledge. IBM is our partner, AWS is our partner, right? And we are able to incentivize the faculty, those who are coming from the industry or the faculty, we are employing them rather than buying a land of 20 acres or 30 acres and setting up a campus, say 50 or 60 kilometers away from the Mumbai, and taking them faculty and student is extremely difficult. Model, and we are not running online. Online student is hardly 5%. 95% students are on campus. So I am saying even the on-campus brick mortar traditional education model is changing, is drastically changing.
Great, great. You mentioned about your online venture, Bhupesh. Would love to know about this MUni. What exactly is the platform and the whole model all about, and how you're trying to kind of scale it up further in the time to come?
So, Sameer, all these years, so I was born in Bastar. by the way, and that's the reason I gave you the example of Bastar. Right? So what I have seen that, and I talked about this birth penalty. There is a huge inefficiency in academic infrastructure across the world. We have cities which are centered around some cities, and there is a huge inefficiency in whole academic world across the world. Now, if we have to really improve this efficiency and remove this birth penalty, we need a solid big digital infrastructure. And that's what for last 18 years I have been building the digital infrastructure. So today, take example of Carnegie Mellon. Carnegie Mellon has deployed digital infrastructure, which is taken from almost 15 to 20 companies. So, for example, they will take online application from Embark. For learning and management system, they will take it from Moodle or Desire to Learn or Blackboard. For lead management system, they will take it from Salesforce. For web conferencing, they'll approach Cisco Webex or Zoom or Illuminati. So they will, and for ERP, they will go to SAP. Now, academic institutions do not work like a corporate. They don't have a CIO and 100 people IT team, just like HDFC, and buying the solution from multiple companies and integrating it. So we realize that yes, why not really give this entire digital stack on one cloud platform so that academic institution will focus only on delivery, have to really worry about this underlying digital infrastructure. So today, in university, we have right from learning management system to e-commerce platform to web conferencing to placement suite to examination conduction, everything. So whatever you can really think about, you forget, you come on this platform and start running it. Now, we are seeing in last 20 days, all large universities coming to us. But as I told you, while we're talking, the examination is going for NITI, one of the top institutions. One large school in Delhi, they have taken our platform. Entire Goa government academic institutions are running on our platform. So I think a lot of digitization is happening, and essentially this digitization is needing for improving the efficiency and enhancing the learning outcome and enhancing the experience of stakeholders, which is students, which is faculty members, which is industry. And that's very critical.
Wonderful. Bhupesh, we would have loved to carry on and all the best for MUNI. But I think in the last 60 minutes, and I still have those streamings of questions coming in, but we'll have to really kind of log out because of the time. This is fantastic in terms of not only you provided great glimpse in terms of the inadequacies of Indian education system, but you also provided very path-breaking, pioneering views in terms of what needs to be done to fix it. Because eventually, when you try to kind of calibrate with the global models, one thing which came out was very, very interesting that look, there is a new model which can be worked upon to breed more entrepreneurs, to create new alternate kind of a careers out here. And current system needs to be leveraged more, as you rightly said, rather than investing afresh. Great set of insights, I think, and this is something what I personally say that I think for the participants, going by the questions and the feedback what you're getting, it's been absolutely very, very engrossing. Thank you so much, Bhupesh. It's been a pleasure to have you over there and wish you all the best. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Samir, and thank you so much all the participants for your patient hearing. We would love to really share more thoughts with you. We'll interact on some other forum, and stay happy, stay safe, stay healthy at your home, and let's pray that this whole coronavirus crisis gets over very soon, and sometime we can really meet in a physical world beyond this virtual world. Thank you so much, Samir and team and everyone. Bye-bye.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.